from its headwaters in Minnesota to the Gulf of Mexico. This river is the watershed for 32 states, and we are impacting it with our actions. The litter that we produce from coffee cups to masks or plastic bags can end up in the environment, making their way to our rivers and then into the oceans. Globally, this results in about a dump truck's worth of plastic entering our ocean every minute. The Mississippi River drains 40% of the continental United States, creating a conduit for our litter to reach the Gulf of Mexico. In September 2018, the mayors of the Mississippi River made a commitment to reduce plastic waste in the Mississippi River Valley. To support that commitment, the Mississippi River Plastic Pollution Initiative is working with volunteer citizen scientists, local communities, associations, and researchers to collect data to understand the magnitude of the plastics problem along the Mississippi River. Scientists need data on what's ending up in the environment so that we can use that information to address this important environmental problem. And you can be a part of the solution. Download the free Marine Debris Tracker app and choose the list entitled MRCTI to collect data on what plastic pollution looks like in your community. The data will be analyzed to help us understand the problem, which then leads to solutions that will help policymakers, businesses, and citizens alike take action. Join us today to ensure a clean river and clean seas for all.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jenna Jambeck, a professor of environmental engineering at the University of Georgia and a National Geographic Fellow. I want to welcome everyone to this third webinar for the Mississippi Plastic Pollution Initiative. This initiative is led by MRCTI, which is the Mayors Along the Mississippi River, the United Nations Environment Program, in partnership with National Geographic and us. And we're working with you, the community members along the Mississippi, to create a snapshot of plastic pollution along the river. And you play a really important role in this initiative as collaborators, working with us using a tool, an open access, open data tool called Marine Debris Tracker. So we're going to start off this webinar with some training and further information on the tracker from Catherine Youngblood, and then move on to in a great panel and discussion on environmental justice. And so just a quick note, feel free to put questions in the Q&A box, and I can answer some of them while the webinar is going, and then we'll have a Q&A period as well. So go ahead, Catherine.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for being here today. I'm going to fly through this Marine Debris Tracker training part so we can get into this conversation about environmental justice with our panel today, which I'm very excited about, and I hope a lot of you are as well. So let me get started with screen sharing here. All right. So Debris Tracker is a free citizen science app that was developed in 2010 in partnership with the University of Georgia and NOAA, and we're now powered by Morgan Stanley and in partnership with National Geographic. So we're going to go through a few different things. What is the app, how to use it, data collection, and the suggested surveying protocols for this initiative. But I wanted to make sure you're all aware that all of this information, as well as lots of resources, are available on our website at debristracker.org/Mississippi. There you can find our full field guide, which has lots of details on data collection. So if I don't answer your question today, or if you come up with another question as you're getting started in the field, definitely recommend looking there for answers. So let's get started with what the app is. So Debris Tracker is a mobile app used to collect geospatial data on litter. So every time you're using the app, it's logging unique data points on exactly where litter is in different places in the world. And that data, that granular level detailed data of geospatial points of litter, is really helpful for creating this bigger picture of plastic pollution, which helps us look for solutions. And we've made some progress towards that goal of creating that bigger picture with over 3 million items logged in over 90 different countries around the world today. But a lot of that data has really been focused in coastal areas. So this project is super unique in that it's focused on an inland river. and I think will provide some really valuable insight through working with all of these community partners to collect this data along the full length of the river. And so once you do collect data, all of the data goes to our publicly available open database. This again is on our website, and you can explore data from other citizen scientists as well as your own data here as well. So it's available for researchers, for educators, for policymakers, really for anyone who's interested in this issue to be able to explore this open database. And the goal of this data collection is really to answer these three big questions. What's there? How did it get there? And then really to move towards that solution piece of looking at what we can do about it. And the method I'm going to talk about today that we're proposing for this citizen science initiatives was developed out of methods that we used along the Ganges River in 2019 as part of our National Geographic Sea to Source expedition. So this map here is from transects we did there. And so this citizen science method is based on that same method. So really, this is not just a comparison in terms of the Mississippi, but is also tying into this bigger global effort to look at what litter looks like along rivers across the world. So here, I'm going to talk about how to use the app. So we actually just launched a new app update earlier this week. So this is live in the app stores now. If you have the app on your phone and you update it, you'll see this. Or if you go to the app store and look for Marine Debris Tracker, you'll see. And so how you get started with the app is open it up, you'll create an account, and then you'll look for the Mrcti list. The list is a custom list of litter items, which is still evolving, actually. We're still getting some feedback on things that people are seeing on the ground along the river that we need to add into this list. So you'll see this update and evolve over the next couple days as we get closer to the official kickoff of the expedition, which is on April 1st. So April 1st through 25th is the official dates for data collection for the initiative. So after you log into the app, after you get started with the Mrcti list, you can add items. So as you see them, you can add items, you can change the quantity, you can also add descriptions. And so we're asking that folks add descriptions of brands of items that they're seeing. So and this will allow us to know who to bring into the conversation about plastic pollution along the Mississippi River. So if you see an item and you can identify the brand, go ahead and type in the description box what that brand is. So if you click on the icon, it will open up the description box. You can see you can also search for items. So if there's something that you can't identify, if you're not sure, if it's not in the list, or if it's something different, you can use the other box, and then you can type in what that item is, so that we still get that data even if you're not sure, or if you're or if it's something that we haven't included in the list. Let's see. You'll also see this waiting for GPS signal sometimes if your phone isn't reading good enough GPS signal to move forward. So if you see that, just wait a second and it will update. You can also delete items if you log things accidentally. So under that Manage Items tab, you can click that to update items if you do accidentally log something. And once you're done logging, you can click Continue, and that will take you to a survey where you can answer a few questions that will help us get some important data that will help us analyze your tracking that you've submitted. And then I'm gonna skip through this. So then after you click Continue again, or if you click Save, you'll see the final page, which is an opportunity to also upload images. So we recommend that you upload images of anything interesting, anything unique that you see. You can also upload general overview images of anything where you collected data. And then you can go ahead and click Upload Session. So Upload Session, you'll see it spin and it'll upload to our publicly accessible open database. If for whatever reason you don't have cell phone service, you can click Upload Later, and then it'll save to your phone until you do have service when you can go back and upload it. And then after you're done, on your front page, you'll see your personalized stats for what you've recently tracked. So you can go and look into any of those sessions and see where you collected data, how far you walked, how long you collected for. So A couple of small things with the settings to make sure that the app works correctly. On location, make sure you're allowing the app to access your location, and also make sure it's accessing your precise location. I believe on Android, this is called high accuracy location. So again, making sure we're getting the highest quality geospatial data about litter, and then also allow the app to access your photos if you're gonna submit photos. And then another thing to flag, which is a new feature that we've just added that I think will be helpful for a lot of the organizations working on this project. So the Mrcti list is a custom list of litter items adapted to the Mississippi River, but we're also, we've added a way to create projects within that list. So it'll be associated with the Mrcti organization, but then you can create your own custom project, maybe for a cleanup event, for your nonprofit, for whatever reason you would need to aggregate different user data groups. You can create a project here. So you can add an icon, a project name, a description, and then other users can go in and select that project to associate their data with that project. So let's talk about data collection. So I talked a little bit about how the app is using your cell phone location to give real-time geospatial data about litter. So this is sort of the gold standard, the highest quality, the highest accuracy data. There are a couple ways to do this while you're trying to clean up. You can track in pairs, so have one person cleaning up and one person collecting the data. This is, again, kind of the gold standard of making sure you're getting the highest accuracy data that's possible. We've also had organizations suggest that they're going to have some people go out and record all of the litter and then clean up the whole area. That's another option, again, that would provide that high quality data. But for some folks, we realize that this is difficult. If you're organizing larger cleanup events, this might be really hard to actually go out and try to collect this real-time geospatial data. So instead, you can also you can track all of the data aggregated in one place, but because the app is recording your real-time geospatial location, you need to do that in the vicinity of the area where you collected data if you're going to use the app. However, we do have an option online called the manual upload option. So if you go to our website and you're logged into your account, you'll see this option for manually upload data. From there, you can add in items, much like the app. It's the same list. You'll select the same list, and then you can upload the number and the type of item and click add, and then you can manually select what that location is where you collected that data. So that's another option if you're not able to collect that real-time geospatial data. We've talked about a few of these items before in the guidelines for tracking litter. Again, this information is all in the field guide, but a couple other things to flag here is that we're really looking for visible debris. So, you don't have to count really teeny tiny fragments. We use 1 inch in diameter as a guideline of visible debris. So, things you can see while you're standing up, walking, collecting data. Another thing is if the item is fragmented, but if you can tell what it originally was, log it as the original item. So for example, if you see a piece of a chip wrapper, log it as a plastic food wrapper rather than as a plastic fragment. Again, this is really helpful for identifying sources of litter and what products are the sources of litter, and knowing what we need to bring into the conversation about plastic pollution along the river. All right, so that's how to use the app, and then we're going to talk about a couple surveying protocols that are, again, specific to this initiative and that we developed out of our previous work on the Ganges River. So let me flip my screen share real quick, and I will show you guys the live version of the map. Oops. Okay, here we go. So we created these sampling maps for all of the 3 pilot cities. So there are 3, we're working in St. Louis, Baton Rouge, and St. Paul. And in all of those cities, we've created sampling maps with randomly selected sites to start litter transects. So If you're outside of these sites, all data in the basin is really useful, and we definitely encourage you to still follow these same surveying protocols to collect litter data wherever you are. But we did want to create some guidance for people on where to go so that we can really get this distribution of what litter looks like upstream, closer to the source in urban areas that are adjacent to the river. And so that's where these sampling maps are derived from and focused on, is that urban area in the pilot cities that's adjacent to the river. So all of these sampling maps for each individual site are linked in the field guide, and you can go take a look at them. And you can zoom in on different sites. And these highlighted yellow sites are sites that we want data collection to start at. They're called priority sites in our legend over here. And as we get data in, we'll be adapting these maps. So we'll be turning sites blue that have enough data collection so that we know where data collection's already occurred, and we can help guide citizen scientists on where we need additional data collection and where they should go collect data in these areas. If you do have feedback on these maps, you're also welcome to let us know. We're developing these, from afar, and so we definitely need the expertise of local communities who, know if areas are unsafe or if they're not accessible, if they're private property, et cetera, et cetera. So if you do have feedback on the maps, feel free to reach out and let us know. So once you actually get to a sampling site, this is what actually collecting litter data looks like. So we're surveying in litter aggregation pathways, which is a very fancy way to say pathways where litter typically accumulates. So that might be along the side of a sidewalk, between a sidewalk and a road, where you would typically walk your dog. So we're asking people to estimate 1 meter width, which is about the length from your outstretched fingertips to the center of your chest. So from that 1 meter width, walk for 30 minutes and collect everything that you see. And 30 minutes is, again, a minimum, so you're allowed to collect more data than that if you want. And I also wanted to flag here that while we're certainly encouraging litter cleanup, if you feel comfortable with it, it's definitely not required as part of this initiative. So safety is the top priority. And so you're not required, you can record litter and track litter in the app without picking it up if for whatever safety reasons that is more comfortable for you. The other option is floating debris. So again, on those sampling maps, we've also identified observation points along the river. So we're asking people to go stand along the river and just record all of the debris that they're seeing for at least 15 minutes. So again, this is helping us get this connection of what kind of litter is in the urban area on land, and then also what we're actually seeing in the river. And then finally, we have accumulation sites. So I've mentioned a couple options for recording data for these earlier. So for bigger cleanup sites, it might be difficult to do a transect method, or that might not be an applicable method for an area like a park or somewhere where there's a lot of litter accumulated in one space. Again, if you're collecting this data in bulk, you won't get that same geospatial granularity that allows us to really look at what's actually impacting what litter we're seeing on the ground, things like land use, like where trash cans are, what stores are nearby. However, it's still really valuable data. So for example, this is a data set from a group in Belize that's collecting data along the shoreline there. And while we don't get the geospatial distribution, it's very obvious with the big trends of how much plastic fragments they're finding here. So even when it's not that geospatially accurate data, this is still really valuable and important data. And so we definitely still want data collection, even if you're not able to follow the transect method. Again, I'll refer you guys to the field guide where there's lots more information on how to stay safe while tracking litter. And lastly, I wanted to show this map of the basin. So the orange points here are all the data that we had collected on Debris Tracker in 2020 along the Mississippi River. So you can see it's quite sparse. Like I said, most of this data collection has historically been focused on the coast. And so this initiative is really an exciting opportunity to start looking at what plastic pollution looks like upstream and how we can stop it closer to the source. So I will stop there and take some questions.
Right now, people are asking for the map link. So I'm just just to let everybody know, I just posted Baton Rouge, and I'll post the other two in just a moment.
Perfect. And again, those are in the field guide if you need to access them after this as well. They're also in the field guide.
Okay, there's a couple questions in the Q&A box if you want to, I don't know if you can get that open. And then there was one question, what city in Iowa did we get data on the map? I don't know what city that was.
Do you know? Off the top of my head. Yeah, I'm not sure, but it's all available publicly online, so you can explore it.
I will. I'll drop the link to where the data is, so that's quick.
Perfect. I also see a question on when is the report for this data expected to be available. So I think our report to UNEP is due in June. However, all of the data will be online as it's coming in. So you can go to debristracker.org/data and you can look at the Mrcti list and get a live feed of where the data is coming in, as well as we have some distribution maps on there as well. So you can see what the top items are, what the top categories of items are. So that information will be effectively live as people are submitting it.
Mm-hmm. I'm about to post the other maps.
All right. Okay, I think we have, the next step after the report is done. That's a good question. Jenna, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's really the mayors have, gotten together through Mrcti and want this data, and then it's really in their hands. They can be empowered by this data to make change. And they've discussed anything from policies to, bringing people together to discuss what to do. I think ultimately it's going to be things like that, as well as the start of potentially looking at maybe collecting more data within cities to figure out what actions they want to take. I think this data itself will be actionable, and then they also might know where there's data gaps and what they want to do. And then there would be other locations as well. So, yep, it's just kind of a start, but at the same time, it will be data that can be used for action if desired. All right.
I think we've got most of the questions, but we'll be here. So feel free to reach out if you have any more. Feel free to continue to drop questions in the Q&A, but I want to make sure we give our panel lots of time. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Angel Bradford, who's going to be our moderator, and we will get started with the panel.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to be doing audio separate because, of course, my Wi-Fi goes out now. But okay, awesome. Thank you so much for having us and creating the space for this panel conversation. It should be wonderful. We have incredible people that we will be speaking with this morning. My name is Angel Bradford, and I am a Sierra Club Delta chapter here in Louisiana. Volunteer leader and organizer. I work mostly on our grassroots network campaigns and also with students and interns, particularly at HBCUs. And with that being said, I'll go ahead and give the floor to our panelists to introduce yourself, your name, your pronouns, where you are, and your title or relationship to the work. And then, of course, I forgot to say my pronouns are she, her, hers. Carissa, if you would like to start us off.
Sure. Hi, y'all. My name is Carissa Gilman Hernandez. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Community Empowerment Organizer at Dutchtown South Community Corporation. We serve the south side of St. Louis.
I'll jump in. My name is Asha Schaffner, pronouns she, her, hers. Live and work in the city of St. Paul, which is Dakota homeland. And my role in the city is the Environmental Education and Outdoor Recreation Program Coordinator. So focusing on connecting Black, Indigenous, and people of color to nature.
Greetings, I'm Charles Barjon, a student at Southern University. I'm a student organizer at the campus of the grassroots organization called the SU771 Alliance. My role in that is just inspiring the student body to do activism and holding podcast shows to spread awareness.
And where are you located and what are your pronouns?
Oh yes, I'm in Baton Rouge and he, him.
All right, well, I guess I'll go next. My name is Paisley Armstrong. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am from Beaumont, Texas, and I am basically a passionate advocate for environmental justice, but I was also involved with the 771 Alliance for a brief time for like the last 2 years.
And Mary?
Hello, my name is Mary Haney. I use she, her pronouns. I get to work with Asha Schaffner here in St. Paul, Minnesota. I am the education coordinator for our natural resources team, which is within Parks and Rec.
All right, awesome. Well, I have a set of questions for y'all, and just feel free to jump in. It should be a good, vibrant discussion. You don't have to wait on me to call on you. But just to give our attendees kind of an understanding of the landscape in your area or your environment, what are the environmental fights and works that are happening around you, and what brought you to the fights?
I can hop in.
Yeah.
Here in St. Louis, we, I think, just keep making national headlines for every wrong reason. And, you know, about our systemic racist systems. So Dutchtown South, along with 3 other community-led organizations, Arch City Defenders, Action St. Louis, and the Sierra Club of Eastern Missouri, came together with the support of Washington University of St. Louis. And we put out a report at the end of 2019 called Environmental Racism in St. Louis. And what we did was we were able to do on the ground research, really delving into the systems in St. Louis and mapping out racism in St. Louis. And I'll link to the website that we keep updated, but you can see on the different maps where Black people live in St. Louis is overlaid with where the environmental negative factors are. So vacancies, illegal dumping, air pollution, asthma, lead, you name it, like it's bad. So we all have kind of come together to form the Environmental Justice Task Force. And so what we're doing is we're trying to push different, first, we're listening to community first and foremost, always. With that, I'll add the little asterisk that this has been a pandemic. And so a lot of our outreach is digital. And so we are missing a lot of folks that live in that digital divide. And those are really the voices that we want to hear from, because our solutions cannot happen without their input. And so that means that moving into 2021, a lot of our outreach will be deliberately meeting folks where they're at. We're trying to push different policy changes that are community led. We have half our board of aldermen and our mayor is being newly elected in April. So we'll have a new mayor, potentially almost a brand new board of aldermen. And so we're hoping with that change of leadership, we'll be able to push through different policies and things like that. But St. Louis, environmental justice is hot. We have a lot of great folks working on it, from food justice down to just making sure that lead is not in our schools' drinking water, where our lead levels are higher than Flint, Michigan's within our school system. So it doesn't look great now, but in 10 years, we're going to be great. Like, we've got this.
I believe you. Sounds good. Others?
Yeah, so I guess you can say my story with activism really goes back to my upbringing. I guess to say I had the privilege of being a Boy Scout since the 2nd grade. And within that organization, I learned about the important environment and many, and one of them is the Outdoors Code, which emphasized, being a protector of the environment. And coming with Boy Scouts, I also went on lots of trips. I spent a lot of time in the San Bernardino mountains. I spent a lot of time going to the Grand Canyon, going to Mount Zion in Utah. And from how seeing what the status of the environment was in the second grade and in those younger years of my life to what they were when I was 18, leaving high school and seeing the depletion of water, seeing the erosion of the mountains and the roads that lead to these trails, you see over time how these fires in California affect the communities. So taking that experience and coming to Baton Rouge when it was time for me to go to Southern, and seeing how these chemical refineries, namely Exxon, affect disproportionately the Black community. And honestly, my peers here at Southern University, it only added to that fire I had to protect this environment. So finding the 771 Alliance, finding Angel and Caleb Holmes, and really being guided and instructed as to be a better organizer is why I'm here. And I think environmental activism is honestly the key to solve many of these other social problems that we have lingering around in our government and in our world today.
Mary, do you want to go first and talk about St. Paul, and I'll jump in after?
Yeah, sure. I can get us started. So some of you may have heard that Minnesota is the land of 10,000 lakes. And going along with that, Minnesota has a strong history of ecotourism, which has really shaped the state's kind of approach to environmentalism. We're in kind of a unique position there that there's money in the environment here. It's a major industry that supports our economy. So in a lot of places where the economy is something that is environmentally destructive, we have a unique situation where in large portions of our state, the environment is something that is preserving it is, there's money in that. But it turns out that also in Minnesota, we have, or at least in the Twin Cities, we have some of the largest racial disparities in the country. And that goes right along with those environmental issues. So when we have, most recently, the COVID employment gap, it's BIPOC folks that have been losing their jobs and been hit the hardest by this pandemic here in the Twin Cities, as I'm sure it is around the country. So we have this weird landscape where wealthy folks and along with that often white folks have been part of this ecotourism environmental sort of movement historically. But there's a pretty big disconnect here between those people who have been fighting for clean water that they can go up to their family's cabin and take out the fishing boat. And those people who are living in neighborhoods and communities in St. Paul that are affected by things like air quality and are fighting those battles on the ground because they're fighting on multiple fronts. Asha, you want to jump in at that one?
Sure. Yeah, so I think, it's like my kind of where I fit in, right? And how I got interested in this kind of work is like, I like the outdoors, but when I would go outdoors, I would get a lot of questions of like, what are you doing here? Like, are you here to cause trouble? Like, why, just a lot of assumptions or questions. And it's like, the white folks that I like showed up at the park with weren't getting those, right? And, it's like, we think about being, like stewards of the land, stewards of the water, but it's like, if we don't have a connection to the land and the water, we're less likely to take care of it. And in order to have a connection, we have to feel safe, right? We have to be able to access these spaces and programs and waters and rivers and, all the things. And so this past summer, when George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis, which is, right across the river from us, I started doing some BIPOC specific programming that was both, exclusively for Black, Indigenous, and people of color and exclusively led by Black, Indigenous, and people of color. and it's like like Mary said, it's like we've got more than 10,000 lakes. We have such a beautiful like environmental landscape here, but it's just really inaccessible, for folks that look like me, right? And it, I would say it keeps going, right? Like my job is to get folks outdoors, and I was saying in a meeting a week or two ago that like 3 out of my last 5 times that I've been outdoors I've had some really negative interactions with folks yelling at me, white men yelling at me about, various things. And so we've got a lot of work to do. And creating an environment and a space and a program that is specifically for Black, Indigenous, and people of color is allowing us those opportunities to connect with one another and ourselves, but also really to deepen our connection with the natural environment.
Thank you. Paisley, did you want to weigh in? And did you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, you can repeat the question, and I do want to weigh in.
Okay, awesome. So just basically, what brought you to the work, and can you kind of give an understanding or a picture of the landscape of environmental fights and work in your area?
Yes. So what initially brought me to the fight was basically my irritation with, I'm going to say, how much people cared about the environment, how much people cared about, let's see, what's the best way to say it? How much people actually cared about the work itself. And then when it came to doing the work, the disconnect. So that really initially made me excited to start it because I wanted to find more people that would help. But in my area, it's really the opposite of what I would like. So in Beaumont, we are very close to the water. So you can see immediate effects of what people do. So if there's a lot of, well, I'm going to say with the masks, like, how we have single-use masks, single-use bags, gloves, all of that we see immediately. And I'm not going to lie, it's kind of sad. So in Beaumont, it's kind of depressing. And then on top of that, we're actually regressing backwards since I kind of heard like 4 days ago that our waste management companies are ending our recycling services in July. So our area is just, it's going through it. So I'm very like, I don't know. I used to be a lot more excited towards the fight when I did live in Louisiana, when I was a part of 771. But after coming back to Beaumont and seeing how everything is regressing, it's sad. And we're getting a new mayor, and the mayor doesn't really have any stance on environmental justice or anything towards pollution. So it's a little depressing out here.
Okay. So you're seeing that like juxtaposition or like the juncture and differences between Baton Rouge and Beaumont along the Gulf Coast. Okay.
It's extremely different out here than it was in Louisiana.
Okay. And do you want to speak to your time at Southern at all and like the fight there in BR?
I would like to reflect on that because at Southern there was such more, well, I'm not going to say much more structure, but I enjoyed the work that we did because we did have, I'm going to say I love the protests. I love everything that we actually planned together. I love organizing everything. Out here, I try to literally organize the same, but it doesn't come together as well because people are not as motivated. Okay. It's more structure, and the literal structure, well, I'm not going to say the literal structure, but the actual, what is it? Everything that we've done, that's just all I can say. It's just everything that we've done was a better experience than what I have right now.
Okay. Well, I hope, this conversation can give you fuel to bring back what you've learned in Baton Rouge and to where you are now in Texas, because we need y'all in the fight too.
Yes.
So to everybody, and thanks, Paisley, how do you ensure community science represents the diversity of your community? anybody can jump in, or I'm frozen, one or the other.
Yeah, so I think one of the easiest ways for me to make sure community science is relayed to my community is through podcasting. I have found in my work that that's my go-to medium. If there is an update that needs to be spread politically, if there's an update within the science community about environmentalism and how it's affecting us disproportionately, if there's a grievance that's happening environmentally on campus, it's always through the podcast. And I think that's because it's coming from a place that's not professional, if that makes sense. It's not coming from a place, people aren't going to feel like they're in a lecture. They can relate to the podcast. They can relate to the messaging and the wording. So if I'm somebody who's involved in activism, I'm reading my long emails, I'm reading my articles, I'm studying, I'm making sure that I'm up to date on the information. That's not necessarily what the community wants to hear or what they're going to understand. Is then our job, or my job in that case, to relay that information in a way that my peers at Southern University can understand it, so they can understand exactly what Exxon is doing to our campus. They can understand why the South Gulf Coast is affected by climate change disproportionately, historically, not just today, but even back in the 70s. So that's my answer to it. Community science is relayed through podcasting and through relating to the actual audience that I'm talking to.
So my job here in St. Paul is I basically engage with the community in community science projects to help them understand their ecosystem. And I jumped in after Charles there because going off my previous comment, Minnesota's environmental landscape is historically disproportionately white and disproportionately wealthy. And there's a big disconnect in environmentalism in our community between that kind of historical activism and the environmental justice movement that's taking root, and that Ash is really doing a lot of work around here. So when I do my work around community science, I don't do as a nice white lady here in St. Paul. I don't do any targeted outreach. Because I don't think here in St. Paul, our BIPOC community needs another person who looks and acts like me to show up and start preaching about how majestic and beautiful the birds are and how we should go out and look at the birds and track that. I am not the person to do that work. So I don't do targeted outreach, but I do a lot of drop-ins to meet folks where they're at. So I will go to a park and I will hang out there, and we do get all sorts of folks using our parks, not disproportionate, it's disproportionate to our regional demographics, but folks who are already out there, already using the park, already enjoying it, just talking to them about like, what are you seeing and experiencing out here? And can we get you connected with some projects that help you or that encourage you or are an avenue for you to understand new parts of the park, and how can we learn from each other here? So I think I use these community science projects, things like iNaturalist, just to help people, to help reveal invisible parts of our ecosystem, right? St. Paul, like all of your cities, is an ecosystem. It has lots of diverse and interconnected parts that rely on each other to survive and thrive. That's living and non-living things. It's human and non-human systems. And I really like using that kind of language around ecosystems and community science of understanding that ecosystem, because the language of ecosystems, I think, really translates well to the language of justice and diversity in our community. A healthy and vibrant ecosystem is totally reliant on the vibrancy and health of all the other parts. So we can't have a healthy and diverse community if we're not focusing on all those parts.
I can jump in, and I'm glad Mary is a part of this conversation, because she really is doing some really great community science work. Because it's like when I think about that question, I'm like, well, It's not my priority. My priority is just getting us outside, letting our nervous systems kind of settle down a little bit. Like there's so much healing that's happening and kind of decompression and resetting that like, yeah, community science is not top of mind. I think we're getting there, right? As more and more folks are spending time outside and we're deepening our connections, then there is more interest in doing community science. Like, you know, watching the presentation today, I was just like, wow, this is awesome. Like, I can't wait to do this with folks. But it has not been the priority because again, it's like if we don't even feel safe being outdoors in our parks and we get treated, you know, hostilely, like, yeah. So all that to say, I guess right now, I can't say that the work I'm doing is primarily focused in community science. I think it's right around the corner for us. The other thing I would say too, and you know, it's something that Mary and I have both agreed on, is just like, you know, it's like so often it's called citizen science, right? And you know, it's like in St. Paul, like we have citizens and we have residents and we have folks who are undocumented, and you know, and so even just changing the language around that and making sure that like we call our programs and we talk about this stuff as community science, right? We're trying to make it more inclusive and more intentional and more welcoming. And I think that's something that, you know, both Mary and I have addressed when it comes up in meetings or conversations with folks. We're like, well, we just call it community science, you know, and not to like shame anybody, but to try and make this space and this work more welcoming. Yeah.
Hi, Carissa, did you have anything to add, or Paisley, or I can go to the next question, totally up to you. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna skip to like the last two because I want to leave time for Q&A. But let's switch gears a bit to plastic more specifically. How are y'all seeing plastic pollution's unequal impact show up in your communities and cities? And what I'll also do is I'll make that two parts. So like, and, or like, how is that impact showing up in your communities and cities? And either what are the policies you're fighting for on the plastic front, or you would love to see happen to address plastics in your area?
I can hop on. So here in Missouri, there's actually a state rule that says that municipalities cannot ban plastic bags. Okay. So we're already starting behind the 8 ball. And I will say Missouri, the state of Missouri will go out of its way to stop any municipal like steps to make, you know, our citizens' lives better. So that's where we're at with it. What I've been seeing with plastic, so Dutchtown South does a lot of work with illegal dumping in our solid waste system. And in St. Louis, we have alleyways. Majority of our neighborhoods have alleyways, and large communal dumpsters are in the alleyways. And it should be 1 dumpster per 4 units, and those dumpsters are a mix of solid waste and recycling. We don't actually know if those numbers are still accurate. They were when they were set, but who knows? The city does not keep track of anything. What we're running into is that we have so much single-use plastic items that just go straight into the dumpster. And so they're filling up the dumpsters faster. We have old truck systems, so they don't necessarily always get picked up. You're looking at small items that fall out really easily. There's also a lot of single-use plastic that is not recyclable, but ends up into our recycling, and it ruins the entire batch. St. Louis has a huge problem with our recycling just being sold to other countries that just throw them into a dumpster, which I know is like a universal problem in our world with the plastic issue. So what I really want to start seeing, because we can't just say like no more single-use plastic, no more plastic bags, things like that, is larger corporations incentivizing the decrease of plastic, making those steps on their own, either because of federal regulations or because they grew a conscience. The other thing would just be to see that the different groups that do, like the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and the Black Chamber of Commerce, encouraging their restaurants and grocery stores that fall under their umbrellas to start looking at their plastic use and seeing where they can turn that down. And I'm going to include that in styrofoam as well. And so that we have less things going directly into our dumpsters, and those dumpsters aren't being filled as quickly.
Other folks want to weigh in? And I can repeat the question because it was long and two-part. Essentially, how is plastic pollution's unequal impact showing up in your communities and cities? And then what is a dream policy that could tackle that issue for you?
Yeah, so plastics, when I speak of plastics and I'm relating it back to my experience at home in California, that's a place where plastic bags are banned. You see people walking into grocery stores with their own bags normally. It's a social norm to say. But coming back here to Baton Rouge, that's something that's almost foreign to some people. Plastic bags are in use heavily. Around Southern University specifically, you can see plastic pollution everywhere. The parking lots are usually where you see the most. If you're walking across the bridges through campus and you look down into the water, you'll see more than just plastic. You'll see bikes, you'll see to-go plates, styrofoam. But you know, plastic affects these communities heavily, not only because there's a lack of awareness or there's a lack of knowledge, as pollutants are bad for the environment, but there's no trash cans, there's no recycling systems in place there, so we can't it's bigger than just saying, okay, people are being careless. A policy would need to be established that's beyond banning plastics. There needs to be some type of infrastructure within that policy that's going to provide for better and more efficient waste management. That way these communities and even places like Southern University have places to throw away trash. Personal testimony, when I first came here as a freshman in, I think, 2018, there weren't as many trash cans as there are today. The SU 771 Alliance actually lobbied for trash cans in the recycling program heavily to the Student Government Association. And luckily, we got more trash cans, but that is not enough. You can have trash cans, but where's the recycling? And then once we go to recycling, okay, let's talk to the cafe. Can we get rid of these styrofoam boxes and move to plastic, then move to cardboard? So it's really a process that I want to see. And I think, like I said before, waste management should be something discussed more. And then alongside waste management, just general education, so we know why we're actually calling for waste management.
All right, anybody else want to say anything?
I don't have much to say on this. The one thing that just comes to mind though is that like during this pandemic, right, I feel like we have been using more plastic because things have to be kind of like single serve, like we can't just, open up the bag and let everybody put their hands in anymore, right? Like we have to have it all kind of laid out. So I can see an increase that way that hopefully will shift, as we kind of get out of this pandemic so that we don't have to like package every single thing individually, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think like in Louisiana in particular, because we're like along that petrochemical corridor, and plastics is a big money maker for oil and gas, as like our state depends way too much on oil and gas for monies. It's been interesting to see over the years when working with SU students or learning from y'all, how many people prevent us from achieving anything. They're just like, well, we can't stop using this. We can't help you with this. And then it's just something you give up on because it takes years of going in circles. And a lot of the language, of course, has just switched to elimination, as well as waste reduction completely, because the systems aren't even working, that oil and gas has put into place. And so it's just a messy conundrum. But I'll turn to audience questions. And let me see. Jenna, can you resend? Okay, good. Someone wrote, I'm wondering about how single-use plastics are a sign of wealth and having to reuse items is seen as something that people who can't afford otherwise do. How do we address this? Does anyone have thoughts on that?
My immediate thought is the idea of consumerism, and you have to readjust your societal scope and to understand that just because you're reusing something, for example, Tupperware, does not mean you're not wealthy in that sense. I mean, what exactly do you see as wealth anyways? So that's my immediate thought is consumerism. And honestly, speaking from an environmentalist perspective, we can address our consumerism and how much we take in and how much we use. A lot of these problems that we recognize as hindrances to our communities would fall away naturally because they would no longer exist because the demand for the plastics to be made no longer would exist. The source is no longer there. So consumerism, there is no wealth in just hoarding plastics. The wealth is in what you're doing in the community, in my opinion.
I have the opposite experience here in St. Louis. Like being eco-friendly is like hot and like really cool, and it's expensive. Like everybody wants to have these like beeswax like things to put over their Tupperware that's glass. And I was talking to somebody about it recently, and I'm Mexican American. My family, as like Mexicans, have always been eco-friendly. Like our little tubs of margarine was then our Tupperware. Like we've always been reusing things because we're poor. Like I think being poor is something that like you don't throw away food because food is expensive. You don't throw away, you reuse things. You clean aluminum foil. And I think a lot of props needs to be given to the fact that like are those who are lower on the socioeconomic scale often are not the big producers of these things. We're looking at Starbucks. Like I love Starbucks. It's one right by my house in Dangerous. And I have 2 cups that I have on my counter to remind me that I went to Starbucks twice this week and to use them as my water cups. And so I think that we need to rethink about like, I'm not hoarding them so I can be like, oh, look, I'm fancy and I can go to Starbucks. It's more just, it's convenient and I have the means to have a convenient drink.
I want to just jump onto that because it reminds me of a conference I was at where this Asian woman was like, we've been doing this. We've been reusing things. We plant our plants in the margarine containers and and it's like, but people don't call that or consider that as like, eco-friendly or eco-conscious or whatever, because it's not the, $6 metal straw or the, $5 or $10 canvas tote bag or what, it's like, but you're exactly right of like, it's like, how do we like, just, how do we value this, right? Like how do we talk about it? And why is, somebody's tote bag that they bought at the co-op for whatever, $10 different than, the person that's just using the same plastic bag over and over every week, right? Like both are reusing something, but we just look at this other side as more legit or, whatever. It's like our grandmas and our aunties and our, our family, we have been doing this. And I think it's part of the, I guess, like discrepancy that I can feel it here in Minnesota of like, just like, and I think again, it's like when we realize it, that we're already doing it, you know, and it just isn't seen that way, but then like we can keep doing it, if that makes sense. But anyway, so thank you for sharing that. It's just like, this woman's like voice just was like, oh yeah, that reminds me. And so yeah, I totally resonate with that. So thank you.
All right, our last question. Anyone can weigh in. Definitely folks that feel passionately about this one. So a question from the audience. Speaking on the topic of COVID as a public health crisis, which disproportionately affects BIPOC, what are your thoughts on the environmental justice movement being viewed and discussed as a health crisis, particularly for BIPOC communities as well?
I'll jump in unless somebody else wants to, because I know I've taken up a lot of space. Okay, so I'll direct people again to the Environmental and Justice in St. Louis website. We have videos up there that from conversations that we did at the end of the year with people about solutions to the 8 issues raised in that report. Part of that, though, was talking about the COVID-19 impact on the different levels. And I think I'm not saying anything we don't all know. COVID-19 did not like create new problems. It put stress on it problems that we already knew existed. And so we watched as Black and Brown folks were at risk of eviction. And not only are they at risk of eviction because they were the first to lose their jobs, they were also the folks that we asked to like keep going to work and put their health at risk. We've had Black and Brown folks dying at higher rates from COVID-19, but they're also the people that are most likely to be missed by the packages that have been brought forward. I appreciate Mary mentioning earlier that we have a lot of folks that are undocumented in this country, and they aren't going to get those federal funds. But more than that, you have to have, St. Louis just released the funds today for rental assistance. You have today and tomorrow to apply. If you don't get that information in the next 12 or so hours, you will not be getting rental assistance. And you have to be plugged in to get that information. And so we've just created systems that are just not usable to folks who actually need to use it. And I think that's what COVID-19 really has like shown a spotlight on, and we're all still ignoring. And not by we here, but we as a big society.
Anyone else want to close this out? All right. Well, thank you, Carissa, for that final response. And you're not taking up too much space. I appreciate all of y'all. It gives me such good energy to just listen and learn, and I honor and respect y'all's work beyond words. It's so grateful, and I know y'all's communities are too. And I don't know if Jenna or Catherine, if y'all have anything else to add before we close out, but thank you so much for giving us this space. And again, I say thank you for the conversation and discussion. And the audience, thanks for the Q&A.
Thank you. I just echo all of that. Thanks, Jel, for moderating so beautifully. Thanks to everyone for giving their time. I know it takes time, and you're often asked to do many, many things like this. And so we really appreciate your time, and just encourage everyone to keep the dialogue open, keep it going, and amplify those voices that need to be heard. Thank you again.